Welcome to season 2 of the Absolutely Right podcast, the first graphology based podcast show in India. I'm your host Aditi Surana. I am a graphologist and a high performance coach. If you're new here, let me tell you, I present different ways of using the simple technique of handwriting, which is through graphology, graphotherapy, handwritten journaling, and much more to really solve the complex, difficult, really stuck up problems in our lives. Now, how do I do it? On a Wednesday episode, I analyze people based on their handwriting and get to know their secrets of being so successful, fascinating, and inspiring. On a Friday episode, I give you one handwritten journaling prompt and teach you how to use graphotherapy to find your connect with yourself. Now, if you think, does it really work? Is it really worth it? Give it a shot. Watch one episode, see if it works for you, and then decide. I know my subject is difficult. Like in the last 2 weeks, I've been speaking at different forums, different places where people ask me, oh, how did you choose this as a career? Was it really easy? What were the challenges? Now, I must say, 17 years ago, when I started my journey with graphology, I had no clue what I was walking into. It is literally like being in love, following the passion, just doing whatever it took with each project, and life just kind of figured itself out. Every single day when I wake up and I look forward to my day, I look forward to those smaller moments where I get to look at a handwriting sample, look at a smile, a deeper connect with a client. And I think that's what makes it worth all the challenges, all the battles, and all the troubles, I may say. So, if you have a dream that nobody can see through, and if people don't believe in it, if you believe in it, go for it and do whatever it takes. So many times people talk about ideas as like these dreamy concepts, but the work behind it is what makes it true. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to our today's guest. Now, they say it takes one to know one. It takes a woman to know the other one. It takes a passionate entrepreneur to know the other. In today's context, it takes one Aditi to know the other. I'm saying this because our guest today is a co founder and head baker of this amazing company that serves delicious baked food called Baker's Dozen. I've been their customer for the longest time. I think pretty much from the time they started in Bombay. And the things they dish out are delicious. If you haven't tried Baker's Dozen, please try their sourdough breads and their cakes and so many other things. It's not a promotional thing, but as a genuine feedback from a customer, a genuine promotion from a customer, I must say. Hi, Aditi. Welcome to the show. I am so excited for personal reasons also to have you on the show, and I'll get to that. But thank you for being part of our journey here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to know more about myself.
Great. So, before I say anything, your walnut banana bread was always my favorite. There was a point I ate it every single week and struggled through my diet, but had to eat it because it was so yummy.
Yes.
So Aditi, how did this start? From psychology to baking? How did your journey go that way?
So, I studied psychology and human resource management with the intention that someday I will get into training and development.
Yeah.
And I studied this in England. I came back in 2009. I met my husband, and we were trying to figure out, let's start a business. And then we said, why don't we start a business together?
Okay.
And then we said, why not start with something with food?
Mm-hmm.
And food is something that always interested me, not enough to start a business, but when we started more talking about it more and more, I said, okay, this sounds good. And that's when I went to the French Culinary Institute in New York to learn baking, and that was a game changer for me. I went
Okay.
there just to see, how do you make good bread? I just wanted to be one of those well-informed managers, really that.
Okay.
But my chefs were amazing, and when I started baking and I learned how to bake, I realized this is what I'm meant to do in life. I had
So you
suddenly
literally had
figured
your
out
connect.
exactly. I had figured out my Ikigai in life that this is my
Wow.
purpose, and I just wanted to bake. I didn't even care about selling bread. I just wanted to bake bread. If
Oh,
someone has to
nice.
buy, it's
They will
Sone pe
buy, right?
suhaga. Yeah.
So, people who do not know what Ikigai is, it's a Japanese way of finding your purpose, and the process becomes so engaging and fulfilling that you don't care about the results. Cannot agree more with that concept and what you just said. I'm getting goosebumps to just think about the exploration. Now, we were talking about or rather I was telling you that in your handwriting I find you're extremely patient, especially when we are dealing with all our technological hassles before we started recording finally. So in that context, when I look at your writing, I cannot see the aspect of losing your calm easily or giving up on your ideas. No matter how tough things become, you hold on to them and you make sure that you do your best. And it has not only in your professional life, but even in your personal life, it has taken many, many years for you to get to the outcome that you had in your mind to begin with, but you haven't given up. I think that's incredible.
I really like how you put the spin on patience, because anyone who knows me says exactly the opposite. But I do agree with what you're saying, because when you start a business, and you start a business which is so different than what you're used to. When we started making sourdough breads in 2013, and that time sourdough was not really a common concept people knew of.
Right.
And it required a lot of belief in the product to stick by it. Okay. And consumers did not know, but no, consumers were the easier ones to explain and teach this to. Our sales staff, who always had these targets to achieve, said, "Ma'am, ये नहीं बिक सकता. This is too different. Can you just make your regular bread? वो मैं बेच दूंगा." And we just had to stand tall and say, "No, this is my bread. This is what I like. This is the right one. Trust me, it's just a matter of time." And it's just belief in your product that people will get around. And we waited for several years, and then now during the pandemic, everyone's talking about sourdough. And so I feel I should go and get more gyan from my customers what sourdough is.
Yeah, with all the flavors and beetroot in it and this and that, and totally, yeah, of course. Instagram was totally filled with all those pictures of bread cuts and at the center. And
there are times where we get a message or an email from consumers saying, "This is how I make my sourdough," and I'm like, "Wow, that's an interesting technique. I could adapt to that."
Nice, that's amazing. Now, Aditi, do you have any questions for me? It's awkward to call you Aditi. It's almost like Karthik calling Karthik happening.
I wanted to understand that what is the importance of a signature when it comes to handwriting analysis? I mean, does it matter if someone uses just the first name or the whole first name and the last name? Is that reflective of anything?
Oh, a lot. So signature is your public image. So when you look at, walking into any formal situation, talking to people, even at times in the house, when we talk to our parents, we suddenly become formal if you have to deal with some, specific topic that you know that they would disapprove of. So anywhere you get into this formal behavior, your signature comes to your rescue. What do I mean? Is that behavior is captured in your signature with or without your knowledge. So we never design signatures saying that, "Oh, I want people to look at me like this." We don't do that. We do it naturally. We say, "Oh, this is my artistic expression. This is my symbol." But because it brings out the whole identity on the paper, it is the public identity that you carry. Whereas handwriting is about who you are and how you think, and when nobody's watching, how do you behave? All of that is handwriting. Now I'm going to quickly go back and talk about the question that you ask, why people think that you're impatient. Now it's not about impatience. You are direct, you're to the point, and you're harsh when it comes to giving feedback if they ask you. So you would not mince your words. You would not say things that they want to hear. You're like, "Okay, this is black. I cannot define it any other way." And people are like, "No, ma'am, but you should be like little polite and, call it like charcoal gray or something." You're like, "No, I can see it's black and there is no other way around it." And that's how
I so wish people would get that better.
Your life will be easier, but not theirs for sure. So when it comes to your signature, when you write only your name, it talks about you consider yourself as an independent person. So much so that when it comes to representing yourself, you say, "My family is there and they are kind of my supporters and cheerleaders, but I would not depend on them."
Understood.
Whereas when you have your surname, you kind of have that family with you when you build your own life ahead. So we cannot be removed from our parents' influence. Obviously, we are woven into it pretty much, and that's how we think. But some people are more influenced than others. This is where the difference between only name and only and a name with a surname.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
Now that is your question on graphology. When I look at your handwriting, I can talk about multiple aspects of your personality. So what would you like to know about yourself that I can answer from handwriting?
Okay. So when you see my handwriting, what does it reflect on being able to multitask between different roles? You know, your personal life, which is being a wife, a mother, a daughter, and your professional life, which is running a company. What does the writing? What
Also
is my
with your
writing?
husband.
Yes,
Also with
yes,
your husband. So here
yes.
you have dual role right there, like
Exactly.
being a
Like
wife
in the
and being.
in the same moment, you're
Oh my
wondering.
God. I don't know how you do it, but kudos to both of you because I have heard it from so many couples that it
Yeah,
becomes extremely difficult to divide that space. Now,
true.
how you do it, if I have to look at your writing and talk about it. So, Aditi, you speak well on the topics and subjects that you love. But as I look at your writing, it moves towards the left side. And that talks about you being an introvert, which means you
Okay.
take a lot of time to open up and really express your deeper emotions. When you do them, you will be direct, as I mentioned, but
Yeah,
you take time. You would not be impatient about saying what you really feel. You might have an outburst because you hold it back for so
yeah,
long that by the time you speak, it just goes out of control
yeah.
at times. But most of the time, you hold on to it as your simple idea to go around. Now, being an introvert, you get recharged when you are spending time by yourself, when you're
Uh,
not being bothered by other people. So even if you're alone or if you're baking, when you're not communicating, not baking with five people around, like just baking by yourself, this is your recharge mechanism. And if you're recharged, you do not care about how other people are looking at their perspective, what they're doing, but most of the time you are surrounded by people, and your source of irritation is that you're not able to, or you
hmm.
cannot feel that you are tuned in. I'm also referring here to Carl Jung's concept of introvert and extrovert, how
Yeah,
he defined it as
yeah.
recharging yourself with people or without people. So you are great at doing it without people. So after this session, I request you to really take out time on regular basis to recharge yourself. Otherwise, you will just have those small outbursts
Small.
happening every now and then.
This makes so much sense now that you're mentioning this because for the past 3 weeks, I've been not getting my driver to work and I drive myself, which is 1 hour each direction. And it's my
Wow.
best time of the day because, you know, I talk to myself and I'm thinking and I have the best ideas. And now it makes sense because, like you said, you recharge when you're alone.
Yep. And also it's not only recharging, but it is also your way of exploring. It's almost like having those personal, brainstorming sessions with yourself where you can
Exactly.
become your advocate, devil's advocate, and fight your own thoughts. That does not happen with any other human being in the room. Even it could be a
Exactly.
child who's not talking to
I
you,
agree.
but your just attention gets divided and then you can't do it. It's so beautiful to see how our
Yeah.
brains are wired, and we can
Yeah.
just tweak the same rule that is applicable for everyone else
Yeah.
and tweak it for ourselves in a different style and find a newer aspect, a
Yeah.
newer personality altogether, which is so good. Now, one aspect which I see as that you
Yeah.
are definitely an extremely process driven person.
I can't
Anything that
contest
you
that. I can't contest that.
And I must say that is the reason why you could take baking as a hobby and convert it into profession, because you can trust your processes beyond other people's doubts and whims
Yeah.
and fancies and any uncertainty. And that I'm saying because when you write your letter M, it is like really rounded and also wide. So if you look at your own letter M, you
Huh.
see that there is like width wise it is stretched
Understood.
out. Now, anybody with that trait talks about how methodically you look at the process. And it is almost mistake proof. You just make sure that every single scenario is considered before you say, this is my plan and this is how we
Yeah.
will be looking at it.
So I have a very interesting question to ask here.
Sure.
Now, you say that this personality type is a bit methodical. How should I use this as an asset? Because what happens is there are times situations are a bit chaotic, or the people you work with is a bit chaotic. How do you not let that irritate you? And how can you bring about the process in those chaotic situations or
So it's a
with those
great
chaotic
question.
people?
It's a great question because most of the time your strengths can become other people's weaknesses, and
Yeah,
also faster people may look at you saying that why can't you move faster, and without
exactly.
having
Yes.
really indulge into every
Yeah,
possibility here, you can't move
I
forward. So
totally
that's
agree.
Absolutely that. So now let's look at how can we go about it. First of all, the most important aspect here is knowing that this is how you think, whether it is methodical or anything else, even for our
Yeah,
listeners, like really accepting that this is how I think and this is my
yeah,
method comes really handy. So when people start judging and when they want you to change your ways, you
yeah.
can change it as much as you can, but you won't be sitting there and doubting yourself for having this as your strength, which
Understood.
happens because when
Yeah,
everybody is like promoting being fast and being cool and whatever as an
exactly.
idea, it is possible for you to
And
like
you're
sit
you're
there and
moving
say,
at a little bit of a tortoise pace. Yeah,
okay. Second thing is it requires little bit of explanation on your part for other
okay.
people to see the value in how methodical thinking helps you and helps them more than anything else. So it might not be the natural thing for you to do,
Yeah,
but this is where you have to step out of your comfort zone and really explain to people that this is how I can solve the problem, and
yeah,
next time or after 3 months, after 3
yeah.
years, the problem won't occur. Now, once they see that or once they start looking at that as a pattern, which is
Makes sense.
helpful, they will count on it. Second point. Third point, when people are being chaotic, also there is a possible strength in the other person's behavior. You cannot be judging them, which happens a lot.
Yeah,
When they are being chaotic, they
yeah,
are really operating from the skill set that is not available to you. And that is
yeah.
anybody I'm referring to, people when they behave, contrary to our behavior. There's a beautiful line written by this writer, Maria Popova. She says, most of the time we consider differences as defects.
Yes. Yes.
And we keep fighting the other person on that. And this is where
Very well
you
put.
pause and you say, no, this is different. I don't agree with it. I won't do it like that. But that doesn't make it wrong.
Makes sense.
Okay. The very moment you would do that, you will always
Yeah.
find a midway. It is the matter of judging one
Yes.
another.
That is so well put. And so probably that's going to be my biggest learning from this session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh, I had another question. Um, Now that if I know my personality type, how do I make decisions or take my life forward knowing this? Like, how does this gyan benefit me? How do I apply it in my real life?
So I feel we are like these machines, right? We have certain patterns and we are predictable more than anything else. Now,
Okay.
if you don't know if you don't know what's your pattern of being predictable on, you'll just
Yeah.
experiment and you'll try different things without knowing whether this is really you or not. Now, I always say this: personality is a process. So if you want to change anything in your
Yeah.
personality, you should know where the starting point is. If
Understood.
today I say, okay, your natural tendency is to be an introvert, natural
Yeah.
tendency is to be methodical about the approach. If you know these two things that we discussed,
Yeah.
now you walk into a situation and say, okay, I want to learn more analytical thinking, but my fundamental nature is methodical. So how I switch from here to there can happen. So only analysis of personality through any tool, any method, is to assess where you are in comparison to where
Understood.
you want to go, which I feel is an incredible benefit. And
Yeah.
when I look at people, it's like a body checkup that you do every year to
Yeah.
understand, okay,
I
this is
can
where I'm
imagine.
at, and I can now work on my cholesterol like that, and I can work on my sugar like that. I'm using these two terms because that's what happens to your customers.
Understood. Understood. Um, okay, this might be a bit of a silly question, but
No, go ahead.
we write very little these days. We type on our phones, and which makes me think that my handwriting has changed over the period of time purely because it's out of practice.
Okay.
Does that reflect on who I am? And if it does, is it like a valid reflection?
Okay, so your handwriting has changed? Yes. Is it because you do not write much? No. It is because you have changed as a person over these years. So the way you used to think,
Yeah,
function, go about was very different than who you are right now. And those changes are captured in your handwriting. Yes, handwriting is not used much nowadays, and
yeah,
if you would have continued to write, probably the formation would have looked different. But handwriting has 800 permutations and combinations.
understood.
So no matter how you look at it, this represents who you have become. Whether it looks good or not, it doesn't
Doesn't
matter. For
matter.
me, it's like literally like a graph, and that's why we call it graphology. So the
Yeah,
graph talks about the deeper aspects of your personality that are otherwise missed.
Understood. Are there any other such interesting personality traits from my handwriting samples that you can?
Yes, one of them is my favorite,
Uh,
which is when I looked at your writing, this stood out for me. Now, every time you write your letter A or O, there is no loop inside that letter. You
okay.
know, so many
Yeah.
times when people connect one letter to the other, they
Yeah.
have loop on the right, they have loop on the left, they have multiple loops at times inside, knots kind of
Huh.
formation. In your A and O, there is no loop. Now that shows how clear you are at your heart when you do things. So if you feel upset with people or if you do
Yeah.
not agree with something, it shows on your face. If you are if you are really in love with something and
Yeah.
convinced about it, it shows on your face. So that I feel, obviously in our Instagram
Yeah.
filter driven society, is not the coolest thing to look at. But if you look at human values and genuine connection and
Yeah.
deeper friendships, it's a quality to cherish. Because if you have become friends with someone like 20 years ago, till
Yeah.
date, you know that if that person is your friend, you'll do
Yeah.
anything and everything it takes. Now, that is a sign of integrity, that is a sign of being so frank that you do not play the games that mostly all of us, fall into socially, otherwise. So, you stick
Understood.
to what you believe in and pay the price for it.
Yes.
Many
I
people don't
definitely
know
have to pay the
the
price for
many people don't
it.
know the paying the price aspect of it, because it is really expensive to be that frank nowadays.
I totally agree with that.
Another aspect of it, your
Yes.
writing is disconnected. Now it's beautiful to see methodical thinking person who collects all the information required and puts
Yeah.
all the efforts to gather it to present a final really robust conclusion. But because your writing also talks about disconnections, which is
Hmm.
about creativity, which is about not following rules, which is about really going with your intuitions or gut feel to make decisions. Now it's so beautiful and interesting to look at these two contrary
Yeah.
behavioral traits coming together. And if I am not wrong, if I have to describe your working style, you follow the method but you keep reinventing the process. But you love to reinvent the process and not like whimsically do things. The
Yeah.
whole process will be reinvented when you feel in your guts, when you intuitively
Yeah.
feel this is a time to do that. So it's a combination of gathering information and intuition to put things in your decision making. It's wonderful to look at that.
So I don't know if this is a reflection of that, but last year, sometime I think in the month of July, August, or September. So we have a very detailed production plan here at the factory where we produce bread, cakes, cookies. And sometime mid-July, mid-August, I said, listen, let's just scrap this plan and make a new one. Something
Okay.
inside me said we can do better.
Mm-hmm.
And my staff came and said, listen, man, you had only made the previous one also. I said, I know, but something tells me that time has come and that plan is not benefiting us the way we wanted to. So let's
I'm just going to
redo it.
pause you here.
Yeah,
This something tells me is everyday observation of small, small gaps that you keep seeing.
yeah,
And one day it becomes like this clear
exactly,
internal, feeling that you got to do it. And that becomes your inspiration to do it. But it is an everyday observation that you keep
exactly.
gathering this. Right.
So
Go
anyway,
ahead. I
so
interrupted.
we made a new production plan, and generally when I like to do something new, I don't like to tweak it. I prefer just abolishing the entire thing and in a way restarting to refresh your brain, refresh your way of working. And about a month and a half of executing it, everybody who was part of it was so much happier. They found life was easier, they found work was easier. And so we were all wondering, why did we do this much earlier? Why did we
Sure.
wait until now?
Right, but that's only about the process is bigger than you. And
Yeah,
going back to Ikigai that you spoke about,
yeah,
that it's literally like picking up Ikigai and building the whole thing. So you use that word when we were talking before the
yeah.
conversation. How do you find your Ikigai in your work?
When I was learning how to bake, I felt that is when I truly discovered who I am and what I wanted to do in life. There are times
Life through work. That's
in
amazing.
exactly because there are times when you study and you feel, okay, I've done well, I've not done well, but it was during the baking where I said, listen, I'm enjoying doing this. And whether this will be a hobby, whether this will be a career, I don't know what it is, but I was really, really enjoying doing it. And I would not look at the hours. I would feel happier. My body would feel better. So I just knew this is what I wanted to do. And till date, I feel in any situation of chaos or panic, if I'm in my plant, if I'm just seeing how it's being made,
Mm-hmm.
it calms me down. Instead, I think during the pandemic, the very fact that we were operational kept me sane because I
Oh, nice.
needed that to just be normal.
Wow. Lucky you. Most people most people envy you on that one sentence like, oh, during the lockdown you did what you love to do. How amazing is that? No, but I cannot agree more on this one. Like, I feel that about my work. Every time I have a handwriting sample in front of me, I
Yeah,
blush. I blush while talking about it. It's just that feeling where you feel you're home, whether things are working,
exactly.
not working. It just feels calm. I totally get that. Now, another aspect, if somebody is
Yeah,
starting, I meet a lot of people who are considering baking as a career,
yeah,
and they, especially during the lockdown, they explored, they baked, and they say,
yes.
okay, I think I like it. What do I do next? So if they become like proper chefs or not, but how do they go about it? Like, how do they try it out, and where do they drop the idea? Most of the time when you're excited,
Yeah,
passionate, you do it for some time and then you
yeah.
realize the business aspect of it. And how would you evaluate? Where should one drop, and how they should look at this as a career, hobby, or both?
So this advice sounds very contrary, but I feel you should never do a business because it makes business sense. You should do it because you enjoy it
Mm-hmm.
and have faith that if it's something good and interesting and if you're really putting your 100% to it, it will make sense at some point. I'm sure this is a concept you also experienced when you took up this very controversial part of
Career.
graphology, that what am I going to do with it? But if
Yep.
you have faith that you feel like the world will turn around someday,
Yep.
um, the beauty of cooking or baking is you can do it at any scale you want. You could do it from your home with a small kitchen. You could rent a small kitchen near your house, or you could put up a big factory. So it
Right.
really depends at what stage in life you're at and how big do you want it to be. And so there's so many bakers I know who either bake breads or cakes or cookies, and they just start selling by in their local area,
Right.
geographical local area, in your same complex, at your neighbor's place, word of mouth. And this is without even using the beauty that is the Instagram and Facebook communities.
True.
So I just feel, listen, if there's something you enjoy, start. But one thing you should be clear, you're not going to give up. It cannot be something I did and then, okay, you stopped after a few years. You give it everything you have. And when it doesn't work, you give it double of what you have
Well said.
because you
Well
have
said.
to make it work.
Because
That
when you
commitment
stand
needs to be there.
when you stand behind an idea with that amount of integrity and grit, I don't think anything
Exactly.
can go wrong.
Exactly. Instead, I don't understand when people say, I'm going to build a business to sell. Why? I mean, I'm building a business to spend the rest of my life with. This entire
I,
building something to sell doesn't make sense to me.
I know some people are wired differently. I hear you.
You
I
know?
also have
Yeah.
similar problems. Now, Aditi, one thing I want to talk about, which is the
Yeah.
concern area, according to me. So that's some feedback that you can ponder and think and look at. Now,
Okay.
with all the great, uh, passion, creation, all of that you have been nurturing, and you work very hard at that. So many times you do not give yourself enough credit for the work that you have done.
Hmm.
And I'm saying that because this segment of our conversation is called Autograph Please, where I look at
Okay.
your autograph with your signature and talk about how people misunderstand you. Because signature is your public image and handwriting is who you
Yeah.
are. So when we have the gap, so many times we get lost in the translation between the two. So when you
Yeah.
are in public, many times this happens, you tend to become, unknowingly by the way, self-critical. And then when you turn
Okay.
back, you look at your own self and you think about that same conversation. You say, but why did I say that? Why would I come up with this aspect here? Like, this wasn't
Yeah.
valid. This is not what I was thinking. But in
Yeah.
the moment when people disagree with you internally, in your being, in your heart, in your soul, you know that you don't want to do it, but you do
Yeah.
become critical and also harsh with yourself.
I think I can think of several instances of this right now.
Yep.
But so, what does one do in a situation like that? Because I think one of my thought processes when something like this happens, let's say I've met someone new, or let's say I've met someone whom I look up to a lot,
Right.
and they'll say something, and I feel like, listen, yeah, I need to That's when I become self-critical. But where do you draw the line that you're being self-critical or you're actually going to
Being
evolve
evaluated.
more as a person and take this advice forward? How do you differentiate that?
So self-criticism comes with I shouldn't have done this particular thing.
Understood.
It also has a negative emotional connotation to it. It has
Yeah.
reprimanding yourself as a thought behind it. So when we say I was beating myself up, kind
Yeah.
of recurring thinking process. When you become
Understood.
evaluative, you look at the situation as like the bread that you tried baking with the best possible
Yeah.
ingredients and recipe and it went off, it went bad. So you look at
Yeah.
it and say, okay, what went wrong? So there is an objectivity there.
Understood.
So when
Understood.
you lose the objectivity and when you get involved, or I would
Makes
say when
sense.
you indulge into that critical self-dialogue is where the problem is,
Makes sense. This
right?
actually makes sense now. Yes.
And also the harsh conversation or the words that you use, and it could be a casual comment, but I always
Yeah.
tell people what you say to yourself is
Yeah.
5,000 times more important than what others tell you, because that voice
Yeah.
is most trusted.
Yeah.
Now, you definitely have a critical inner voice. I believe other
Understood.
family members are there to do that job. You need not take up their role to be critical from within. So let them do their job and you can really sit there and figure out what you want to do. But that's the idea. So when the criticism comes your way, instead of like really evaluating it, you first take it in, process it in by really, really thinking about it over and over again, by ruminating over it, and then you evaluate. I think we just got to change the sequence. That you
Understood.
first evaluate and
Makes
then you
sense.
let that information in to even think about.
Makes sense. So, because we are talking about this autograph, so something I've noticed in my signature, I've always written my signature as my full name. So I write Aditi Handa.
Right.
In the past year and a half, or maybe even 2 years, I've started eliminating the last one or two alphabets of my surname.
Right.
So instead of Handa, at times I write Han, at times I write Hand. What does that mean? I
That
don't know what
means
that means.
that means that so many times you're rushing through the process to a point that you are not getting the complete process driven approach on everything. So when you feel that I don't
Yeah.
have control over it, you just like let it go. And that you
Understood.
obviously do not like. That is against your nature to the last degree. But I must say
Understood.
that when I bought your bread and it has like nice signature of yours, I had taken a look at that. I'm like, oh, this is how she signs. That I remember like back in the day when you started signing on your
Yeah.
product for the first time. So I
Yeah.
had looked at it. Yes.
Interesting. I had one question. When you look at my personality through my handwriting, what do you think is holding me back to work better?
Okay. 3 things. Okay.
Okay.
First one is when you look into the mirror, when you have that conversation with yourself, you are really, really critical of yourself, not only in the harsh comment that I spoke about.
Yeah.
In an evaluative manner, you almost believe let's expect the worst and then build whatever we can. So
Yeah.
your worst begins with you. That one dialogue, that one conversation, and that habit
Yeah.
pretty much is not necessarily healthy in your case. Second thing
Understood.
that I look at your writing, you start your letter Y, you go behind, like you go to the left side and you
Okay.
leave the stroke there. That
Okay.
shows that the person thinks about multiple areas, about execution, about going about life. You go and get stuck to one of the ideas in the past and do not move out of it easily,
Yes, that
right?
happened.
So you feel pegged to a mistake, a disaster, a critical moment in your
Yeah.
career, and you kind of keep reliving it. Now, again, not extremely helpful, because when you want to move
Yeah.
forward, that emotional baggage is built and almost like paid attention to make it bigger and bigger.
Understood.
That is
How do you get out of that?
That is like definitely an aspect of trigger versus reaction and response, because these are our micro choices. So the very moment you start observing the
Yeah,
pattern, I highly recommend handwritten journaling on that, because when you start
understood.
writing your thoughts physically, you
Yeah,
pause, you evaluate, and it is a slower process
yes,
designed for you to look at this thing. So even for our listeners, if you constantly go back and remain stuck in certain aspects, the question
yeah,
that you can use here is, what am I trying to prove with this habit or this pattern that I'm inculcating? Because somewhere we are
understood.
trying to prove to ourselves that I wasn't that wrong. I was
Yeah,
good enough. I did this with all my
yeah,
grit, and there is a justification track that is happening. Now when you ask this, what am I trying to prove even now? Because that thing happened
yeah,
5 years ago, 10 years ago, you're still trying to prove something. Now if
yeah,
that is the emotional connection, giving an outlet through handwriting allows you to be
yeah,
calmer.
understood.
Slowly, steadily, it will start resolving. The third point that I wanted to
Yeah,
make about your the thing that you can work on is, when you observe something,
yeah,
okay, you are great at absorbing it, observing it, reading between the lines. You really spend a lot of time doing that. Now, that information is not necessarily evaluated or used anywhere. So you see
understood.
the gap and you say, I will work on it one day, but the action plan to work on it comes as and when
Ah,
required. But that
yeah,
gathering, that observation process of like picking up mistakes, picking
yeah,
up gaps, picking up what's wrong, keeps happening. So when you evaluate your day, when you
yeah,
evaluate your week, you're more driven by what did
yeah,
not work. So you do not do justice to both the sides. You don't say, okay, these were bad things and these were great things. You
yeah,
forget about the great things pretty much
yeah, because
altogether.
that's just routine.
Yeah. And I think your husband would agree with me on this one, because he would sit there and say, but we did this good and that good, and we could have done, we covered our costs here. And you're like,
Yeah,
yeah, right. I agree with you, but we could have, and we
yeah,
could have, and we could have. So one is pursuit of excellence, which allows you to move forward, but it's
yeah,
also a pursuit, right? So it makes you feel more expanded. It makes you feel
yeah.
lighter. It makes you feel curious like a child. And then there is perfectionism, which is like a dog running behind you,
Ah,
and if you don't get there, it will catch you, it will hold you, it will bite you. And with that fear, when we run, it's the same run, but it doesn't feel the same way.
this can you just repeat this entire thing
Sure.
or elaborate, because I thought this was fabulous.
Thank you.
I've never been able to differentiate between the two, but suddenly it made sense.
So actually, so many times the actions, we
Yeah,
look at the actions and say, did you show up here? Did you do the work? And we only evaluate the actions. And
yes,
they're mostly great because you're committed to your profession and everything that you do.
yeah,
But the reason behind, the motive behind the action can change the experience completely. Right? So if you have to
understood.
wake up for your neighbor's child who's crying in the middle of the night,
Yeah,
you'll do it because you got to do it because it's a child, but you would be like exhausted and you will think about
yeah,
all the morning stuff that you want to do. But imagine doing it for your own child. There is no
yeah,
second thought. There's so much of love. There's like, of course I got to do
exactly.
it. So suddenly there is the emotional experience of the same action is
Yeah,
completely different. So when you do it from pursuit of excellence, it is
yeah,
lighter, it is more expansive, it is like something that you look forward to with curiosity. When you do the same thing from fear of making mistakes or being a perfectionist, or like,
yeah,
oh my god, if I don't do then what, with that kind of dog chasing you
yeah.
on that journey, the same experience is exhausting, pressurizing, stressful, anxious, all of that.
This was fabulous. I thought this was so insightful. If
Thank you.
anyone ever questions graphology, then just repeat this thing to them, because even if there's nothing else that makes sense, if this makes sense, I feel you're sorted in life for at least the next few years.
And Ikigai is exactly about that, right? It is not about what you do. It's
Yeah,
about, do you find yourself when you do it? Do you really add
yes,
value to yourself and to the process?
exactly.
So whether you reach there or not, that running, that taking care of the child, that
Yes,
business decision, everything should feel. And also it's a
yeah,
very Eastern philosophy. In Yoga Sutra, they say
yeah,
detached involvement. So when you're
yeah,
completely involved in an activity, you do the same thing. So all things,
yeah,
and I, for me as a high performance coach, I feel this is true high
yeah.
performance. where you can
Yeah.
every day have those moments of complete involvement,
Yeah.
then results will follow, is my fundamental belief with which I do everything.
This is true. So, now I don't know if this makes sense to that, but about 4 years ago is when I had my kids. We had twin boys,
Mm-hmm.
and I always thought I would work for the rest of my life. And when they were born, right before they were being born, me and you used to discuss that I'll get back to work in 3 months.
Right.
And I didn't get back to work for 2 years, and I just
Because you
wanted to be
enjoy it.
exactly because and this because I was not trying to perfect being a mother or a baker, a businessman. I wasn't trying to do that. I was just enjoying being a mom, and I just
So
wanted to
much.
dwell more and more. And I told them that, listen, you remember when we started the baker's dozen? I did nothing but this, and
Right.
now I feel I'm at a point in life where I don't want to do anything but be a mother to my kids. And a
Yes,
time
yes.
comes when you change, but because a lot of people would come and judge you for the fact that you stopped working.
Right, of
And
course.
I said, maybe I will get back to work, maybe I will not. But if I gave Baker's dozen all that I had, I think my sons definitely deserve that. Then
Definitely. And I
obviously a
think,
time came when they grew older and we could manage and I could juggle between. So then I got back to work. But the
Aditi,
pursuit
but
of excellence happened then.
yeah, but Aditi, what you said is so beautiful, because what you're saying is, if I'm doing this role, I want to do complete justice to it until
Exactly.
I feel that I have done my best job, not about what other people are saying. I think that is
Yeah.
one of the reasons why your company and overall the venture is so successful, because you stuck around with
Thank
so
you.
many ideas like that. And thank you.
Thank you.
We are releasing this episode in the week of Women's Day, and I'm so happy to share a story that is this powerful, this empowering, and simple at the same time.
Yeah.
It's not about like you have to fight the battle and all of it, just like you just follow what you believe in and be at it for things to fall in place. I think that's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for sharing this story and also being so vulnerable with all the questions that you asked. You're like genuinely, you're like, I got to know this. That's great learnability. Thank you.
I know you almost forget that people are listening to it and maybe they're judging you, but it's just been so much fun knowing about yourself.
Of course, of course.
So
Lovely having
thank
you.
you so much for having me here.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for teaching me so much today in such a short period of time. That's really fabulous.
So please implement these lessons and tell me how you feel about them and what was your eureka moment when you implement things. Those stories are always fascinating for me. For me, those are like
Done.
those my Ikigai moments when I see transformational stories. Yes, perfect.
Done.
So, how was it for you? Did you find that methodical M or even the clear O in your writing? Every single conversation like this, interview based on graphology can reveal different aspects of your personality. You'll say, oh my God, I didn't know this was true for me. And those are your pearls. Those are your moments where you dig into it, think about it, ponder, and see how it is applicable in your life. Make the most of it. Now, if you're listening to this episode, watching this episode on the YouTube channel, you know this. Now, if you have any comment, any specific question for me, you can DM me on my Instagram handle at Aditi Surana. If you're watching this episode on the YouTube platform, then you know the drill, right? Like, share, subscribe, comment in the comment section about what were your takeaways and how would you grow with it, what would you improve about yourself. I cannot wait to hear all these things. Also, I'm saying these things for the first time. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Absolutely Right. If you want to know more about my work, you can go to the website aditisurana.com for your own queries and to see how we can help you. You can write to us, write WRIT at aditisurana.com. That's my email ID. And on our Friday episode, I will be presenting one more journaling question with graphotherapy, grapho journaling, and we will be looking at a newer aspect to change something about you, your life. Let's connect on Friday. Till then, happy writing.